we need are actual ass more REM albums. As a matter of fact, this is the 11th REM album, and it is also the 11th REM album that we have covered. So, Matt, go ahead and run the numbers for REM.
Yep, so this is Up by REM. It comes in at number 292 in the 1990s on Best Ever Albums, number 31 in 1998. Number 1,588 of all time. It is REM's 11th highest rated album on Best Ever Albums. So as John said, it's coming up behind all of those other albums that we covered before. I will not go through all of them, but we did cover REM multiple times in previous episodes and seasons. And Up did not make Rolling Stone's list, and REM is ranked number 17 of all overall artist rankings on Best Ever Albums.
Okay, well, and one thing I'm going to start doing, because we're not putting the tracks in anymore, is what tracks would I have put on the beginning and beforehand. And so I would have picked, if you're looking for 2 tracks, I would have picked Day Sleeper and Walk Unafraid as my 2 tracks for this. I think At My Most Beautiful would have been the runner-up for that. So a lot happened to REM before this album, guys. Most famously, the fact that Bill Berry, the drummer and the only founding member of the band who was ever not in the band, retired from the band in October 1997 after that long-ass Monster tour. Now, we had talked about they toured forever on the Monster album, and just about anything that could go wrong went wrong. They all got sick or had major health issues, all of them at one time or another. And Bill Berry had a brain tumor, and they did New Adventures in Hi-Fi while they were touring. So that album was sort of developed on the road. And so Bill Berry was still playing, but that tour ended. And this album, there are 2 session drummers, Barrett Martin and Joey Warnaker. And also, most notably and most famously, I think, for this album, lots and lots of drum machine. So that is one big change. Change number 2 was that Scott Litt, who had produced every REM album since Life's Rich Pageant, so that goes back to 1986, was not the producer for this album. It was Pat McCarthy stepped into the producer role on that one. And the third one was that this album, I think, is probably most known for REM plays with electronic music, I'd say, because this electronic music was a conscious decision. They had a conscious decision to integrate electronic music into this album. And also Michael Stipe, who famously sort of said, my lyrics don't really mean anything and largely are just almost like onomatopoeias to the music at times. I don't believe that necessarily, but he's tried to use that line a little bit. He does have a specific lyrical bend on this. He says it is religious, spiritual versus science, technology, a look at that in the modern age. So staying on the theme of things that seem extremely relevant to the year of our Lord 2025, this is the 3rd straight album that in some ways ties into a 2025 theme. So I guess our last album, Blink-182, we'll figure out if there's a theme there. But the making of this album was very tumultuous. The band said they came close to breaking up during this process. I read a lot of times it was the second closest they came to breaking up. I am a big enough REM fan that I know what they would refer to as the first, and that was during the Fables of the Reconstruction period, where they had a famously difficult recording session. Interestingly enough, that's really the only REM album we didn't do a bio for, because I believe I was sick that week, and so we didn't really go into a bio on that album. But that is an interesting.
Yeah, you weren't even on the. That was a bonus episode,
right? Which is funny because that's one of my favorite REM albums. So it was a shame I didn't get to come in that one. But in case you're wondering, I can summarize it down to that album is awesome and very melancholy. So, but yeah, it's the band managed to stay together, but Bill Berry did leave. It had 4 singles, this album: Day Sleeper, Lotus, At My Most Beautiful, and Suspicion. Although I must say, guys, while I remember these songs, I remember this album, I do not remember the singles being in the ether nearly as much as any of the other 90s albums, or even some of the big singles off of the albums that followed this that maybe were not as well received or sold as well. I definitely remember singles off of both of them more than I remember the big tracks on this, on things like the radio and MTV. So that is a little bit of what was going on. In case you're wondering what they were all dealing with, Bill Berry had a brain tumor during that tour. Mike Mills had an intestinal tumor. Michael Stipe had a hernia and also lost his voice several times. So they're there. Also during this time, the band had to part ways with their longtime manager from the beginning, right? An unofficial fifth member of the band, if you remember going all the way back to Murmur, Jefferson Holt, due to some allegations of sexual harassment. So that was a pretty big blow for them because the personal is the political for R.E.M. And so I'm sure that was not a comfortable spot for them to be in. In case you're wondering about Pat McCarthy, he had been an engineer for R.E.M. before, and he'd also worked with some of the production and the recording on albums in the 90s for YouTube and Counting Crows. So that was there. There was a period of this album where Michael Stipe had writer's block, and they had to stop. And yeah, I would say an interesting... the 90s after the first couple albums, guys, do seem like R.E.M. is playing around with different formats, doesn't it? And I'm curious to see what you guys thought of this format of R.E.M. Let's start with Matt.
Yeah, so I'm very familiar with this record. I remember hearing about it after I got back from Ireland, if I'm not mistaken, or not too long after that. Because it was released when I was over there. So it's from 1998. And I remember my brother talking about it and being like, wow, the R.E.M. album is so different, but it's great. And I was like, really? Okay. So I very much like this album. I know they went into a very different direction, like with the electronic aspect of it. And one of the things I like about this album is it starts off fine. Like Airport Man's kind of like an interesting, almost non-song. It's kind of like this vibe that's kind of got like this mood that's kind of happening, and then they kick into like maybe a more traditional. I wouldn't say that every song on here is an electronic song, like something.
No.
Like Lotus is definitely like more of a rocking song. Day Sleeper. You mentioned the singles, John. I would say that Day Sleeper is the one that stands out by far as the one that I heard on the radio, and I would.
But they went from no electronic to like a noticeable amount of electronic.
For sure. And it kind of, and I think Suspicion is kind of, so Lotus was great, and then Suspicion kind of comes on this like, it's interesting that was a single. It's kind of like another, like kind of more of a somber, melancholy, kind of song. And then for me, the album really kicks in because I basically from tracks 4 through all the way through the end, it's just one great song after another. I like the variety here. I like it's the very, a song like, At My Most Beautiful is a total Beach Boys, homage, right? Like very much a Brian Wilson, Beach Boys. It's just very...
It's exactly what I wrote down too.
Yeah, I mean, it's like no brainer there. And if you remembered, I was remembering this because the song Hope, I brought that up all the way back in season 1 when we covered Leonard Cohen, and we covered Leonard Cohen's songs of Leonard Cohen.
Suzanne.
And the first song off that album, I was like, man, this sounds familiar. It sounds like kind of like that R.E.M. song from Up, and sure enough, that's what it was. If you guys remember, was something they realized after the fact. They wrote the song, and they're like, yeah, this is very much similar to Leonard Cohen's Suzanne. So they gave him a writing credit. So he had nothing to do with this. I think they kind of plagiarized him without really knowing it, and then they retroactively just gave him a writing credit. So, but I just love the sound, the electronic sound that they do when they do it. Sounds great. Like it's just kind of whatever the synth that they're using for that is just a very cool sound, like, and it doesn't really seem dated, right? It seems just kind of like there. It just is what it is. Sad Professor's a wonderful song. That's just such a great. I love the chorus there. I like just intricacies of the acoustic guitar and like how it builds. A song like Day Sleepers is a great. That totally makes sense that that's a single. I love how that sounds. And then Parakeet's like one of the most like interesting songs on here. That's always been one of my favorites of this record. The core, it's very dark sounding. It's very kind of like, I don't even see sad. It's like this ominous sounding song, and what he does with his vocals and where he does with the notes and the progression of the notes. It's just it's not traditional, and you wouldn't think. I don't see it coming, right? Like it's just the way that he does that is very unique. So I think this album's chock full of great songs. This is certainly of all the post Bill Berry albums, this is the one that I know the most, and this is one that I like the most. It's the one I go back to. I actually think It's it's hard to say. It's just one of their strongest albums. Well, they've got pretty much all their albums are super strong, but I don't think they miss a beat here. I appreciate the different direction that they go in, and I think that they're trying different things, and I think they really hit on it with this. I love this album. I pretty much can say positive things about every song. It's great variety. Michael Stipe sounds great. The production sounds great, and I'm a big thumbs up on it. I enjoy it.
Yeah, I was as with most REM albums, I think, or all of them. I was unfamiliar with this one. I didn't even recognize the singles, and like you guys or like Matt, I was kind of like blown away by this album. I found this album super listenable. I thought it got better every time I listened to it. I found that it felt so organic, the way that they incorporated electronic into their sound. It felt like, it still felt like REM, but it felt like a different version of REM, which is like kind of the best thing you can do when an artist tries something new, is to retain that kind of core sensibility. I thought once again, like kind of the writing or the song construction is top notch. I thought the incorporation there felt like a wide variety of kind of electronic, like either keyboards or like, I don't know, like strings or like I thought there was like maybe like steel drums at one point. Like there's all these types of like different things going on that feel so of a piece with whatever song they are a part of. I also noted the homage to or kind of inspiration, Beach Boys sounding song. I was a little like, Airport Man, like you said, Matt, is kind of like almost like an ambient song. It's very like mantra or like in a repetition. I was a little thrown by that at first, but then once you get into Lotus, like it really is like song after song. There's no kind of like, unlike Don Illuminati, there's no filler or weak songs on this album. My favorite song was Walk Unafraid. I found that one incredibly catchy. It's the chorus is great. It's probably going up. This would be an impossible task, but it's got to be in my like upper REM songs in terms of my favorite, if we were gonna like rank them or something. I liked you noted Sad Professor, Matt. I really liked the lyrics on that one. I thought that was just kind of very like interesting and kind of introspective, or well, he's not a professor, but like the way he wrote it as kind of like confessional. I thought that was interesting. The Apologist was really great. Lotus is that's the second track, but it really kind of kicks things off and has that like magic of just like the melody and the craftsmanship that I've come to appreciate from REM. And it never really slows down. You think on some albums, the last tracks are sometimes not necessarily with REM, but with other artists, that they get weak, but I thought the melody, Diminished I'm Not Over You, I found that really compelling. Day Sleeper, you guys already mentioned. Even Falls to Climb, maybe a little bit long at the end, but still really good. And it just felt like, for this being like the 11th album, they're still hitting it out of the park, and they're still, I appreciated it. It felt refreshing to kind of hear like a different iteration of the band too. Even though I feel like with the previous albums or groupings of them, there's kind of like more subtle variations that I couldn't necessarily like differentiate between one album to next, whereas I felt this was kind of like a more clear delineation of them doing something different, but still being the essence of them, and me appreciating that. So they hit it out of the park again. And I don't know if you said this or not, but did like the fans like this album as well, or was there like pushback that they were electronic? Or
that's almost a perfect time for me to jump in, because I am the fans, right?
Okay,
like I am famously an REM fanboy here, and I will tell you what my reaction to this was coming into it. There is the Bill Berry thing, right, of the before and after Bill Berry. There's a clear delineation there. because REM starts to integrate drum machine pretty much for the rest of their career, right? So it does sound a little bit different. And I think in my brain, for whatever reason, I always placed, there's 80s REM, there's 90s REM, and then there's the 2000s and beyond REM. And they're all good. I'll sit here and some of that, there's one REM album I do remember not liking, but the rest of them I think have a lot of stuff to like, right? Quite a bit. And I'll be interested, if we do cover all of them, I'll be curious to see if even the one I don't remember liking grows on me. But I remember thinking in my headcanon, right? This was my second least favorite REM album up. I just remember saying, oh, electronic. It's somber. There's not a lot that catches me. I even remember at some point saying to a friend of mine, it's kind of like if they did Night Swimming as an entire album, it felt like to me at the time. And I'm like, I just don't, and that's of course not accurate at all. But so I kind of put this one to the side and I would revisit it every once in a while. And when I'd revisit it, I found it pleasant, but I think I just had it in my brain that this was not one of REM's best albums. And there's so much good REM, like why do I revisit that? And I was pleasantly surprised. But now, do I love this as much as you guys did? No. Like, I do think that 11 rating is the correct one. Like, we've listened to all of it up to it, and this would be 11 of 11 for me of the REM albums we've covered. But REM's so freaking good that, like, 11 out of 11 for them is, it's not a knock, right? It's because this is still, like, I'm looking right now, this is the lowest rated of my REM albums in the score that I do from 0 to 60, right? And I still have this at 47.5 on that scale to give you an idea of when I rank it, which includes as very good as the classification right there. And I think what really stands out, first of all, this album's a grower. The first time I listened to it, I didn't like it nearly as much as I liked it the second and third time that I liked it. I'm with you, Josh. I think Walk Unafraid is the song I pluck from this, as if you pick one REM song from each album and you put it together in a mega album, that's my choice. On this one. Day Sleeper is a great song too. Matt's right, that was the song, if you were gonna say ahead of time, that or At My Most Beautiful were the ones I'd go to. I think another thing that has hurt this album in my head is that Airport Man is not one of my favorite REM songs. I admire the ambition, but it's like, I don't know. And that tends to be a theme pretty much from New Adventures in Hi-Fi to the end of REM, that they put a challenging song at the beginning of the album. Now, in New Adventures of Hi-Fi, I think it's Ebo the Letter, if I remember correctly, and I love that song. So
no, that doesn't. Is
that two?
Album.
Is that two?
No, it's.
Wake Up Bomb. It's Wake Up Bomb, right? The start.
I think that opens the album.
That opens Adventures in Hi-Fi, right? Isn't it Wake Up Bomb? It's.
Give me a second.
Hold on.
I have to go back.
Maybe I'll.
It's How the West Was Won.
Yeah.
Or How the West Was Won. I'm sorry. Yeah. I just, like, in my head, I have certain narratives about REM, and some are probably fair and some are. And I think it's like I start to process that they start to do a challenging song in each of their albums. And in a future one, they do a song with Q-Tip on one of their albums at the beginning. And there's just a lot of, like, interesting choices. And I feel it almost sets the tone with that one. But once it goes into it, there's a lot of Baroque pop on this album. There's a lot of on the fringes use. It's a much better use of the electronic genre than what somebody like, in my opinion, U2 was doing in the 90s, where they were just hitting you over the head with, this is our electric album. Whereas REM's like, we're going to do a tasteful version of this type of music, right? And I think it works better for what they're doing. But this album is the pretty REM album. There's a lot of pretty ballads on this album. And there's a real pop sensibility to this album. And REM always has a pop sensibility to it, but they would, at times there'd be like an eeriness to their songs, or we've said atmospheric a lot of times. A lot of that is gone, I think, and replaced with sort of an existentialism on this album, I'd say, but not a angsty existentialism. It's more of a elder statesman, because REM is elder statesman at this point. And it very much feels like someone looking at the modern world and looking where they're at and finding a way to navigate their way through. Michael Stipe's lyrics are much more direct on this album. than they are in any other album
Yeah.
that I can ever remember with REM. I mean, you can actually kind of get an idea of what he's going for. Now, he played with some directness on Monster and New Adventures in Hi-Fi. Like, he started to write some songs that had a point of view, like, clearly, as opposed to, what the hell's this song about? Like, many of the songs in the early times. And this one, you don't have to. He's pretty direct in terms of what he's writing about. Now, is it specifically about him or others? You don't know, but you can definitely see the work of a writer who has a point of view on this album. And that's one thing that has always stood out to me about this album. And I called this grown-up REM, and I do think it's grown-up REM, but grown-up REM is still pretty damn great. And it's just a reminder to me that even the albums that I had kind of put to the side and said, there's so much music in the world and there's so much REM I like that I don't know if I need to come back to Up. Like, as I listened to this one, I said, you know, I should come back to Up from time to time, because this is a pretty great album. That's kind of flown under the radar for me.
And just think of how many artists like respectfully, like, let's change it up. Let's do something different.
Yep.
Let me go in this other direction, and fail miserably at it. Or they just like, they're clearly like, this is, U2 was not meant to do pop. Like, that album was not like U2, right? But this is REM. Yeah, like you said, it's a more mature REM, and they did it probably because out of necessity, because, you know, they lost their drummer and they were like, all right, let's do something different. And they hit it out of the park, you know, like for like totally kind of changing their sound. So,
and in
respect
the 90s,
for that too.
And in the 90s alone, what are the REM busted out the mandolin? They did a Beach Boys tribute. They did some electronic music. They did glam rock. They did a Patti Smith homage. They, you know, they did hard rock, right? They did all of these. They did noise rock on Monster. They did all of these different things, and they're so damn good that they're able to do it. And I remember one of the knocks you guys loved REM, but you're like, oh, sometimes there's maybe a little bit too much jangle. And then in the 90s, they're like, we're going to deprive you of all the jangle and do like very little jangle, and instead do all of these other things. And usually that's insert Krusty the Clown groan, right? I'm like, oh boy. Like, kind of like what we joke around with U2, right? Like in the 80s, they got a formula that works. And then the 90s, to varying degrees of success, right, they play around with stuff.
Well, and I wouldn't say that I felt like there was too much jangle in the earlier, but it was definitely going back, because those are the albums that I was probably the least from, like the early parts of REM, and then the very latter parts are probably my two least known. I'm least familiar with those parts. I found it harder to differentiate, right? Like, it's clear with these albums that you just kind of, like with Up, New Adventures, Monster, like Out of Time, it's and what is it? New Adventure? Automatic for the People. It's like each one of those albums is different, right? It's going in different directions, and where they had a little bit more of a samey quality. Now, I think that definitely, the more I listened to them, the more I was able to differentiate. But I think that that's kind of what it wasn't so much. It's too much jangle. It's like, well, it's all kind of, it's harder to differentiate. So I liked all of it, but like, I think they kind of developed more mature sounds and tried different things, which clearly they hit every time, you know. So.
Now, I will always be an 80s REM stan. I love 90s REM, but like 80s REM is like put it in the veins, right, in terms of the sound. So I'll push back a little on that. You're not wrong, but for me personally,
and I don't mean it to be like
Fables of the Reconstruction sounds a lot different than Murmur.
That is true. And when we covered that, that is true. You're right. But I think
Green sounds a lot different than Murmur. You know, it's like they're very different.
I actually don't know which one I like. But I like all of it. I don't know if I can be like definitively this era of REM is better than that one. Like, it's just
there are days where I say REM is my favorite band. I don't know my answer, kind of like you, Matt, that you have like a direct order of it. Like I'm a Tears
I have a top
guy.
Two, but yeah,
I'm a Tears guy, right? Like, if you're in tier 1, you're in my elite tier. How many people are in that? I don't have there's not a gate, right? Or like a doorman to that. But I mean, REM has for pretty much my entire life been in tier 1. And there are certain days, if you told me you only get one artist's discography, like, who's it going to be?
Yeah,
like,
that's not a bad
one. It's
one.
going to be hard to dislodge REM from
not a bad one.
Like, high standard of that. And Josh, where would you fall on that?
Yeah, I would agree. The consistency, that's like Spoon, R.E.M. They're all consistent, all great. The albums. I feel like, as much as I listened to all the albums, R.E.M. albums, over the decades for prepping for this, I feel like I'd have to go back again just to I'd have to continually listen to them in order to get that understanding and appreciation, I think, in terms of which would be my favorite album and things like that. But
yeah, they're the type of band that I like to introduce people to too, and it seems wild that you have to introduce REM to people, but one thing, even though, as I've said, Gen X, we've had our problems. I'm pretty outspoken about that. But one thing our bands did do a good job of is exiting stage left before they became lame. Yeah. Now, that's not to say that there aren't people touring on nostalgia tours right now, but shockingly, even the ones that do, I might not love a little bit of what, say, a Weezer or a Green Day has become, right? But they still sound really fucking good. They don't seem like hacks up there yet. Now they may enter that stage, but they're there. And bands like REM and Pearl Jam and stuff, they just exited the stage or reinvented themselves way under the stage in a way that allowed them to not diminish, I think. So even though REM's does not seem like they were as big as they were, because they've just been off the stage for so long and rock has receded, they also don't have that thing of where people are like, ugh, do you remember the bloated REM?
Right.
Because there never was one, right? So yeah, that's something I really like about that. And boy, when they quit. They're like, we are done.
Yeah.
And now 14